Welcome to the Messaging Maven, your go-to business messaging podcast and community, where we talk about customer communication, building engaging customer journeys, and growing your business securely and at scale. My name is Uku Tomikas. I'm the CEO of Messaging Communications and your host for the Messaging Maven. Happy listening.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Messaging Maven, this time for the March edition, which also happens to be a solo edition. We haven't done these for a while. Usually I've been in the host shoes for a while, but I want to talk a little bit about something special that came out recently, which is our fraud report. And I want to talk a little bit about what are some of the takeaways from that, but also encourage you to actually read it yourself. As we've said before, education is key. Right? So what is it about? What are the key themes? It's actually quite simple. We've talked about this quite a lot in various Maven editions. I've made a multitude of posts about it, but this time we'll also flesh it out in more numbers. The question of evolving scam. What do I mean by this? Well, AI is the big buzzword around the world, and AI is also a large part of what scam is currently up to. What I mean by that is that scam is consistently evolving to be more personalized, more actionable, more trigger-oriented, and significantly harder to fight against. Up to the point where, personally, I've recently also fallen for a scam. It was quite simple. The websites were completely identical. It was very hard to distinguish. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, saw it as a Facebook ad, looked like all of the other cycling-related gear ads that I usually do. It made use of the algorithm and knew that it would be something that I would be significantly interested in. It was very obvious, very convenient. It was quick, made sense. I was sort of conditioned to accept that it was legitimate. And there you go, got scammed out of some money. Hopefully I'll get it back, but right now, I've learned the lesson the hard way myself. And here's where it also highlights a very important part. I work with scam and scam education and fraud education all the time. And I still feel victim for something like that. For me, it highlights that everybody is vulnerable. And that's why education and talking about it is so important, because the quality of the scam becomes incredibly good. It becomes nearly indistinguishable from what the truth actually is. One of our senior developers, our security manager, Marco, did a post a few months ago about PayPal scam and showed how the scam website and the actual PayPal website were completely identical. There were minute nuances that you had to pick out in order to be able to differentiate between those. And that's what we also highlight in the report, what effect this has, what has this done to the actual conversion rates, and what is it doing to customers themselves. How much money are they losing? What do the stats look like, et cetera, et cetera. So it's quite interesting to dive in to understand the implications of this and the constantly increasing impact that this type of scam is having. And then there's my other favorite topic, which is AIT. Now, AIT in its volume has dropped. This is something that a lot of different businesses have noticed. This is something that the industry has also noticed. There's an overall decrease in industry volumes. There's less messaging volumes, making it more competitive, making it more of a turbulent market, so to say, currently at least. And some would say hastening the demise of SMS as a messaging channel, and now starting to favor rich messaging channels instead, where AIT doesn't exist, at least in scale so far. But it doesn't mean that AIT is gone. It has simply morphed and it has decreased. And the reason why it has decreased is because it was an industry-inflicted ailment. It came from inside the industry, and when big brands, Bank of America, American Express, started not sending text messages anymore, pulled out, large amount of market traffic exited with them. And that's what's created the turmoil. So we'll talk a little bit about, in the report, what AIT is, what it's done, what are the implications of it, what's the potential damage of it, and maybe also looking a little bit forward. why it's such a pivotal issue and why it created kind of a new status quo within the industry itself as well. But there are a few caveats that you also need to take into consideration when you're talking about fraud, or more even specifically fraud prevention. It's the GDPR and it's the various legislations that improve consumer privacy, but make it harder to fight fraud. Why? Well, GDPR limits the amount of processing that you can do for fraud prevention purposes, right? Because it needs to show distinctly that what you are processing, the type of data, the different types of data points that you get, the different types of information about a person, a subject, a phone number, etc., is being directly utilized for fraud prevention only. This means that you are limited in the processing to a certain amount of data points. Maybe you would want subscriber data to understand whether the number that is being utilized for one type of fraud, say IIT, is a legitimate one or not. Is there a consumer behavior behind that phone number, or is there not a consumer behavior behind that phone number? Is it a completely new one? Is it a prepaid one? Etc., etc. Getting access to these types of data points is very, very difficult and requires a lot of legal legwork to be able to utilize properly for fraud prevention purposes. So you have to now rely on less data points and more complicated models to try to create that sort of level of normal that you then evaluate whatever filter, whatever AI toolset, or whatever you have against to be able to make a decision whether a piece of content is fraudulent or not. You can, to an extent, look at specific bits of content, for example, indicate whether the content itself has a URL and whether that URL leads to a legitimate website or not. However, scammers are smart, so they will use, IP spoofing or masking or redirects or whatever else is necessary to be able to thwart your efforts to use that as a tool to fight against fraud. So this is a very tricky situation. From the one side, I'm very much an advocate for security and privacy. But from the other side, I'm also an anti-fraud advocate. So finding that balance point between those is quite hard. And it's also sad that some organizations, certain MNOs even, are using GDPR as a crutch to say that they're not allowed to do anything, so they won't. Right? Which leads us to maybe the most important question. So who is to blame? Most of the time we want to blame somebody, right? Well, who do you blame for doing the scam? Well, the scammers. Most of the time you're talking about organizations, you're talking about educated, smart, clever people, organizations that do this on a scale that isn't local, that is usually multinational, that is done in multiple different ways, targeting multiple different brands and utilizing newest forms of technology to make it the most effective form possible. So you blame them. But in terms of prevention, who do you blame? Well, you blame the brands because they're not educating their clients well enough. Be it, banks or hyperscalers or apps or social media. They're not educating their clients on the prevalence of the types of scams that exist on their platform, not well enough. And then the operators are to blame. Well, mainly because they could be the filter between the consumer and the brand pulling out the actual scam. The aggregators are to blame, who are helping, assisting, or not doing enough, or not educating themselves, or not educating the organizations around them, not using their voice to move towards a meaningful change. And last but not least, we are to blame, the consumers, because we don't educate ourselves enough. We aren't thorough enough whenever we buy something. We lack the desire to push governments, MNOs, brands to do their due diligence. We don't demand them of better security solutions because at the end of the day, the one thing we care about the most is ease of access. We see this very often. We talk to brands and we suggest one or another form of sign-in, OTPs, use cases, add a reCAPTCHA, do this or do that, and they just go, well, if we put those things on top, people won't sign up in the same amount that they usually would. So we won't use an app that takes our security into consideration first, because security adds friction and we don't want friction. So we're the blame as well. And then rich messaging, big part of the future, right? Between WhatsApp, between RCS, between Viber, all the other channels that are possible as well. Taking the conversation to a potentially more secure channel, but simultaneously, scam is already there. I mean, businesses haven't adopted rich messaging at the same scale as they have SMS, nowhere near the same scale as they've adopted SMS, but fraud is already there. P2P, RCS, and WhatsApp scams are already very prevalent. The channels are already being utilized to scam people out of their money or give more details, etc., etc. So it's already there. They are already there. They're way ahead of you. So it comes again down to us to help build the narrative, help educate, and help bring that channel into a better position as well. Though there is one thing, a good thing to note. I have received a ton of SMS scam messages, but I have now received a ton of notifications from Google that a bunch of conversations that would have previously come into my inbox as scam messages have been flagged as scam and moved into a different folder. Google seemingly is doing a pretty good job, or at least a better job than most, at filtering out certain types of scam. And that's what we want to see. And that's what we want to see moving forward as well. So what to do? What is the thing that has to happen in order to make this ecosystem, in order to make this industry a better place, in order to advance adoption and bring more trusted channels? First and foremost, education. It is the absolute key pillar of improvement when it comes to fraud, when it comes to scam, when it comes to anything else. Without educating the customers, the brands, the MNOs, the legislative bodies, everybody else, without helping them understand and make educated, smart, data-driven, purposeful decisions that are aimed at a better solution, we will not fight fraud effectively. It is the absolute pillar and core idea that needs to exist. Secondly, use technology. The scammers are already using AI. They're already using different types of new emerging technologies to make sure that they can do this at scale. They're adopting rich channels. We need to do so as well. Businesses need to do so as well. You need to be able to be there to differentiate yourself from them. You need to educate, but in order to educate, you need to use the new types of technologies to know what you're talking about. If you're not utilizing AI in your customer communication, if you're not giving them an advancement and an understanding of what it is, how you use it, they will never be able to differentiate. If you just say, we will never contact you that way, it won't work. Because then only source of communication that they have seen is from another channel, not the same one that they're already utilizing. This highlights one of the most important points to bring out, I think. When you send somebody an email that you will never send them a text message, and they get a text message with your name, they will still associate that text message with you much more easily than if they did get text messages from you, knew exactly what it looked like, and then they got a scam message that was completely different, then they could do a head-to-head comparison. That is why channel adoption is such an important topic as well. You need to be on top of the technology to be able to fight fraud effectively. And a big part of this is partnerships. Partners still need to work together to be able to make the best decisions. And also transparency is an absolute paramount necessity. We need to talk about how things are and be honest and truthful about the issues in this industry, the issues between different channels, between different adoption rates, etc., etc. Talk, share, and drive the industry forward. The current drop in messaging traffic, drop in CAGR, is self-inflicted in very, very, very large extent. The conversation now needs to be around how do we help limit the damage or turn this around as an industry, not as singular companies, not by doing reports and white papers and thinking that will solve something, or encouraging each other that this is a passing thing. We will get through this. We will. unless we actually do something about it together as partners. And we also need to monitor regulations. We need to be able to see whether governments or other organizations will start regulating this thing for us. And especially if they do it from a position of less education. If we haven't put the work in to help them understand this industry in detail and the nuances within it, then the regulation will not take those nuances into consideration. And it'll see every problem in this industry as a nail and themselves as a hammer. And will simply fix it how they see best. Regulations are changing everywhere. Even business models due to that are changing. Take the campaign registry in the States that previously US was a very easy and quick market to get going to send text messages. It's much more difficult and friction heavy now, which also means that it makes businesses who have made their businesses around helping businesses get going fast in the States in an automated manner much more difficult. So they need to change their business models to be able to compensate. And not everyone can. And last but not least, for me, the most important part of any report, of any part of anything that you do within this industry or any other is customer advocacy. Advocating for what's best for them, not what's best for the industry. If the best move is to use RCS, we advocate RCS. If the best move is to utilize WhatsApp, utilize WhatsApp. If the best form of communication is SMS first and then something else, we'll advocate for that. If in Africa the best way to communicate to your customers is USSD, we'll recommend that even if we don't do it. If the next best thing for OTPs is passkey, recommend passkey. Because it's about helping their businesses scale. And this report is about education. This report is about helping them get forward. Not about making us look good, not about helping the industry justify what's been going on, but how to make better educated decisions for the future to help the business grow. And that's really about it. The report has a ton more information. The report has a ton more stuff to read into and understand. View different viewpoints, look at the stats. There are some very interesting reports made by the European Union, made by the UK government that we reference within that report as well to give a little bit meat to the bone, the stats and the numbers to make you understand maybe the relevance and the quantity of this problem, but also some projections from known industry bodies such as Mobile Squared, indicating how the numbers have fluctuated and changed and what the projections might be. So, download it, give us a read, let me know what you think. And if you have any thoughts, questions, ideas, anything else you want to share, if you just want to know more information, hit us up. We'll gladly share and keep you up to date with all of the latest updates. But for now, this has been the March edition of the Messaging Maven, and I'll see you next time. Bye.